So it was like people from our record label were calling them. My older brother was calling them. Just people were just calling them and berating them on their answering machine. And then, I mean, kind of funny. I'll hand it to them. Kind of a genius move in the punk rock world at the time. They put out a 7-inch record with music from them, and then our supposed side, was just all the prank calls.
Welcome, everyone, to This Was The Scene, the podcast that takes a look back at the late 90s, early 2000 punk scene. I am your host, Mike Doyle. Before we start, you know I have a Patreon where you can spend $1 a month for as long as you'd like. $1 a month for a year equates to about 2.5 cups of Starbucks coffee that you'd be giving up to support a good cause. That cause being a podcast, that would be this one. So you can head on over to patreon.com/thiswasthescene if you want to be pretty dope. Voodoo Glow Skulls are an American ska punk band formed in 1988 in Riverside, California by brothers Frank, Eddie, and Jorge Casillas and their longtime friend Jerry O'Neill. They first played at backyard parties and later at Spanky's Café in their hometown of Riverside, where they played shows with Angry Samoans, the Mighty Mighty Bosstones, Firehose, Murphy's Law, and the Dickies. Throughout their career, they put out releases on Doctor Strange, Epitaph, Victory, Smelvis, and again on Doctor Strange Records. I first heard about these guys in the Cinema Beer Nuts comp that came out many moons ago, which I've talked about in many episodes. And I thought it would be awesome to learn more about these guys and the origins and where they're at now. So I reached out to their Instagram, got in touch with Eddie, and I got him on the Skype, and this is what we chat about. Cinema Beer Nuts, getting fan mail, Doctor Strange Records, Bill Strange's book, the band Public Humiliation, Mike Park, getting on Epitaph, having anxiety, Victory Records, shitty music, the Hickey story, which I've wanted to know his side for a while, and a ton more. Lastly, if you need an explainer video to explain what your company does in 60 to 90 seconds, just go over to drive80.com, or you can email me at mike@drive80.com, drive80.com. I do explainer videos, whiteboard animations, and logo animations. If you need any graphics to move on your website, then I'm your guy. So again, mike@drive80.com. That's all I got to say, so feel free to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with anyone who would love some punk rock nostalgia. With that said, let's get started. One of the things that I've kind of used as a reference are old video comps from back in the day, because I used to own. And the first time I heard about you guys, which, we're going to go back into how you got into punk and the scene and everything and how you started the band. But the way I heard about you guys was the Cinema Beer Nuts comp.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, there's only a few of those, but that was one of them.
How many comps did you guys do back then?
Well, we did random little, we did we did one out of focus fanzine. We did a few kind of smaller ones that kind of came out. I think that was on VHS even, man. It was so long ago. I think the Cinema Beer Nuts would have been one of the main ones. That's the one that really, there's a couple other random ones, but that's probably the main one.
So I'm going to probably work my way back up to that, but I just wanted to start with that and say, I'm a person that you guys, when you're doing all these things, I'm fucking 16, 17-year-old me is how I found about you guys from just seeing that video. I thought that shit was genius because no one back in the day got to see what a band looked like until they went to a show. So that really opened people's eyes. Now, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, you can see everything about behind the scenes and all this shit. It humanizes people.
Yeah, it's wild. The world's just different now, man.
And I definitely want to get into how that's changed for you guys. But yeah, dude. So the way I start off every podcast, how did you originally get into the scene?
Well, we just started playing shows locally, man. We officially, I guess, broke into the scene and became somewhat of a name when we put out a record with Doctor Strange Records in '93. He signed us, I guess, and put out a 7-inch and our first full-length record. So I guess that would be the main way we broke into the scene, was by being on that label, where we became actually more of a thing, where we could where we could tour everywhere, became more of a name.
How did you personally find out about the scene before the band, or did the band actually bring you into the scene?
Mostly local shows. We were kind of heavy metal kids for the most part in the 80s, like most people around that time. You were either into that or into new wave or something. You know what I mean? It was 2 or 3. It was either that or this. We were in the metal. Our cousin actually brought us into the scene. I guess that would be the way. He was a bass player in a pretty popular straight edge hardcore band called Chain of Strength. They were a Revelation Records band, and he was 15 years old, and he was in that band. Like he was like the young dude in that band. So he was like 14, 15, and he was already into like 7 seconds and like Uniform Choice and all that kind of hardcore stuff. We went to a show. At that point, we had mostly been to heavy metal shows. Got invited to like a $6 hall show, like in our hometown, like of Riverside, California. It was a show with 7 seconds and White Flag and Uniform Choice and all these bands in a hall in a park right down the street from the house that we grew up in. There was a actual like a punk rock hall show, and we went to that, and we had only heard the 7 Seconds record, Walk Together, Rock Together. Went to see this show and were kind of blown away. Like there was like a cheap show, like like a $6 show in a packed hall, and we had never seen like a slam pit before or anything like that, and it just looked wild. When you're like young like that. We were close to the same age. He was like 15, maybe. I was maybe 16. My younger brother George, who's a bass player in the band, was maybe like 13 or 14 at the time, and we just saw this whole different world that was different from like the Iron Maiden and like the Motley Crue concerts that we had been to. It was like a whole different world. The first like DIY stuff that we ever saw. I mean, we didn't even know what that was. It was just another show, but it was like a show in this hall, like in this park. I was used to playing Little League there, and then all of a sudden we were at a show in the hall there. That was an eye opener. Just seeing like a slam pit, like skinheads and like punk rockers with like mohawks and leather jackets and stuff like that.
Were you guys aggressive kids, or were you kind of timid and you saw that and you're like, oh, this is scary, but I love it?
I actually was a little bit scared. I mean, I was kind of a big, tall kid, but I was kind of scared because I just didn't know why are these people like basically beating each other up. They were slam dancing, and it was just like wild, especially then, because that was like sort of like the end of like the 80s hardcore scene. So it was still like an element of danger. It wasn't like the 90s or the 2000s punk, which is like Warped Tour punk or anything like that. This was like real hardcore, like kind of left over from like the 80s. So it still had the element of danger to it. There was like punk rock gangs that showed up to those shows that would like beat people up and stuff. That was a little taste of that. I guess we were kind of into heavy stuff, with like the metal scene, but this is just a whole different thing, So I think it was a little bit more aggressive.
Did you get to compare Riverside to like the LA scene at all and get to see both of them at the same time, or did you get to see the LA scene later on when you guys started like playing shows and stuff?
We got to see the LA stuff a little bit after that, like a few years. Once we were a band, we saw glimpses of it because that scene would sort of come to us. Like if there wasn't like a LA show, there would be a Riverside show. So we saw like one of the earlier shows right after that. We saw Social Distortion. We went to see Social Distortion with DI. That was kind of a legendary show for my town. That was in '84. I want to say it was the Prison Bound tour for Social D. So it was like when Social D was kind of making that transition to kind of more like kind of cowpunk, more like countrified punk rock. It was the first album where they kind of did that more bluesy punk kind of thing. But there was still like the element showing up to those shows still. And it was a show with DI, so DI was very much like the DI from the 80s still. So that was in '84. So that was still when they were kind of strong and still very like punk rock. I mean, there's still punk rock, but there was like still the '80s, you know what I mean? Still that scene was still there. And that was like the LA scene coming to my hometown into a theater.
How like soon after going to your first show and attending more shows did you decide like, oh, we need to create a band?
Pretty soon after that, because my cousin was an influence. He was already in that band, Chain of Strength, and they already had like a 7-inch out, or maybe even their first record out at that point. And we started playing in our band. We formed our band in '88. I might be getting confused, but those shows were like around '84, '85, '86 were our first real like kind of shows that were like punk rock shows. And then up until that, it had been like big heavy metal concerts that we'd get like dropped off at like at some arena by our parents or something.
I don't want to get too far ahead, but it's gotta be wild to start off in the scene in '84 and now it's 2024 and you've literally lived that and seen the entire evolution until present day from that point when it was pretty much starting. That's gotta be crazy.
Yeah, man. We were. I'm glad we got to catch like the tail end of the that '80s hardcore scene that people talk about. You know, we were a little bit young, but we caught the tail end, kind of like the last gasp of all that '80s stuff, and then it transitioned into like I said, like kind of Green Day, No Effects type punk.
When you guys started though, like, did you want to take from what was happening and make that your sound, or did you see something different that you wanted to create?
We were definitely influenced by that stuff. I mean, right around the same time, it was like that stuff was meant to be by the influences around. I mean, just around us. Like we were sitting on a curb, probably just riding BMX bikes and just being kids. And this punk rock dude lived down the street from my parents' house. Right around those same times, man, like around 85, 86. There was a local punk gang called the Sick Boys, which Social Distortion has like songs about that. One of the members of that gang lived like 3, 4 houses down from my parents' house and just walked by one day and he handed us a mixtape. It was like, here, kid, play this. That stayed with us, man. That this dude with a mohawk with like a leather jacket coming home from whatever party, or just a punk rock kid going home from wherever he was coming from. He was a little older than us, and he gave us his mixtape, and it had the Descendants' "I'm Not a Loser" song on there, and it had like Black Flag, and it had 7 Seconds, and all these bands that were around at that time. But the one that stuck with us was a Descendants song, and we ended up covering that song like years later. But we just latched on to that compilation. That was right around those same times. So it was like we were just influenced by punk rock right at that right time. We went to this show with my cousin. Then we saw Social Distortion at some theater and then we got this mixtape from this punk rock dude right around those same times. And we were just we had already been in the like '80s heavy metal and we were influenced by ska at that point because my older brother kind of brought home those records. He was a mod, kind of like rude boy for a minute in school, and I had a Vespa. So we got into Madness and the Specials and all that stuff. And then we were into New Wave because that was on MTV as well as the heavy metal stuff. So we were kind of into all that stuff really. And then right around that time when we were kind of in the metal, these punk rock kind of influences came into our lives. And then I think that really taught us like, oh, we could do this. We could be like DIY. We could just play whatever kind of music, and it doesn't have to be metal, or it doesn't have to be like accomplished like a lot of heavy metal dudes were. We could kind of piece it together and be not as talented in like the ways of theory and all that stuff, kind of just learn to piece together a band at that point because we were already playing music. We were already trying to be like Motley Crue and the Scorpions and Iron Maiden and stuff. We were trying to learn how to play that way. But it was like punk rock came into our lives and it was like, oh, there's a scene or like a way we could do music and really not be as good as those guys.
Did anybody in the band know music theory?
I was taking guitar lessons. I got the benefit of my parents paying for guitar lessons pretty early on. Like I was like 14, 15. One of my teachers, actually the last guitar teacher that I had, really was the one that kind of got me into theory more, into what it was all about. Like rather than just like learning your favorite songs, he kind of like dug deeper and was like, well, this is why this is that. You know what I mean? And why this exists and all that. So once that became a thing, I kind of had a little bit of theory in my blood the whole time we were doing our band, but it wasn't that deep. I was still pretty young.
I guess where I was going to try to take that was typically a lot of punk bands, they just get a guitar or bass and they just kind of wing it. And then sometimes someone in the band has to have some talent to make there be a foundation. Who in the band when you started was that foundation of, okay, like this person knows their instrument a lot more than we do, and they're keeping this thing afloat?
I think that would be me without being all me. That was pretty much, I mean, we started the band with a guitar, it was all about the guitar. I mean, I basically wrote our first demo in my bedroom on a guitar. So we were always a guitar-based band. I was the one that kind of knew some stuff. Our drummer Jerry and my brother George were slightly behind me as far as picking up instruments and stuff like that, but we kind of still did it fairly close to the same time. But I was already kind of taking lessons.
Were you kind of leading the charge then where were they like following you and saying, "Oh, I want to get better with my instrument because you're good," or did you push them to get better at what they were doing?
It was just kind of a natural thing. I think we just wanted to be a band. We just wanted to play. I mean, I'm not sure if I pushed them or anything like that, but I was definitely already trying to learn. I was going to lessons already and learning my favorite songs and learning how to read music a little bit. But that's when tablature became kind of a big thing, was like in the mid 80s and like the late 80s. So I was learning how to read tablature more and like coming home with tabs from like my favorite songs at that time. And then, like I said, those guys were right next to me pretty much. They just weren't taking lessons.
So when the band starts, what this is a very I don't know if you're able to answer this. Do you remember your first show?
Yeah, our first show was a party. We were playing backyard parties. They were like in the house parties. We played inside of a house. That would be our first show. And then right around then we just kept on doing more and more backyard parties and or playing in a house, like somewhere like like pretty much house parties. But yeah, I remember our first show.
So has that lead into playing in a club or where you start to really break out and notice you're getting a following?
Well, we were lucky enough to just have enough high school friends that were into it, that we were already had like a sort of like a built-in following right off the bat. Like we played a couple parties and it seemed like we just had friends that would go, that were interested like right off the bat, whether we were that good or not. We had a set of songs. We were playing in like somebody's kitchen or somebody's backyard or something. Quickly kind of got a little reputation around town, and then we played our first little club show not too long after that at this place called Spanky's Café in downtown Riverside. That was sort of like an Italian restaurant kind of pizza joint. They had like a little loungy kind of piano stage, and they just started doing shows there. They would move the piano, and they started doing shows there. And I think just by going to record stores, because that's what you did at that time. We went to record stores and saw flyers for shows. We're like, okay, this is what you do. You just go to these local like open mic type clubs. We went to that club and saw like a mix of bands. We saw like a speed metal band, kind of thrashy speed metal band that was called Spiderworks. That was like a thing around here. We saw the Skeletones, which was like a two-tone kind of ska band. And then there was a band called Men from Mars that was like a sort of like psychedelic rock mixed with punk a little bit. So there was all these like styles already that were, bands that were directly influenced by like Metallica, and then a band that sounded like the Specials. You know what I mean? So we were already into all this stuff and just saw that there was local bands already doing it. Kids our age that were already had bands that were kind of accomplished, that were a lot better than us. We just saw those shows, and then not long after that, I think my older brother booked us a show. Just had the guts to go talk to the owner and was like, "Hey, we're this band. We want to play." And we got on a show almost immediately. It became a thing pretty quick for us around town. We started to play and then had 100 friends show up. And once you have your friends show up and buy sodas and pay the $5 cover, pay the $5 cover charge, you're pretty much in.
So how soon after that did you start noticing that it wasn't your friends showing up, it was people who you didn't know?
Within a couple of shows, I think. I think once we played the actual club shows, it was mostly at that club I'm talking about,
Spankies.
Spanky's, yeah, because it was like mostly local bands, and then we saw that club transition into like a international touring bands would come through. Right after that, like the Bosstones came to town when their first record was out. Like I think their first U.S. tour. We saw the Mighty Mighty Bosstones like in '92 or '91 or something. No Doubt was already a thing. They were already like on a major label. They were a thing, but they weren't No Doubt yet. They were signed to a major and maybe had the first album out, but they were still like a little club band and were like opening up for people. They weren't a thing yet. I would say within like 3 or 4 times of our first gigs, we were like, "Oh, you want to open up for the Bosstones?" And so we did. So it was pretty quick, and then we were noticing that people were we had like fans. I remember we were getting like, we got fan mail. Like we had like pen pal kind of fan mail kids. Really early on, we were getting mail to my parents' house because we had like a PO box, or we put them as as the address, like on the back of our demo cassette. So we got written to like kind of right away by like people that were into it. It was just kind of weird the way it was back then, man, because that's the only form of communication really. So people would write to you.
How old are you at this point?
17, 18.
That's crazy. When Rocket from the Crypt starts off, I read something where they would go to shows and print out the lyrics and give them to people that didn't know who they were. They're like, this is how we're going to get people to know us. How did you guys in the beginning, like, did you just show up and play? Did you kind of have, not like, I don't know, did you have like some kind of idea of how you wanted the live show to look, or did you just get on stage and just let it happen?
I think it just kind of came out kind of naturally. We were always just trying to just get better at songs. We were trying to learn. We're trying to find a style. I knew we were trying really hard to find a style, and I mean, whether we were that conscious of it, I guess we were, but we were just really always trying to. Especially me, I guess, I was always trying to find that song. Just trying to write the perfect song, and that's kind of why you end up doing this. I think because you want to contribute your thing to music, and you feel like you could do, not necessarily better, but like, I don't know. It's like trying to figure out like a problem. You know what I mean? Like, we were just always I was always trying to figure out a way to make a song, like try to be satisfied with the song that we're doing. And I think that's why we still do it now. I'm literally doing that right now, trying to write Voodoo Glow Skulls songs and piece it together to where it sounds right and to where I'm satisfied we could put something out to the world. And it's still the same thing.
Well, I mean, like now you have what is it, 30 years, 40 years?
Yeah, 36 years.
36 years of a template that you can pull from. But now of, okay, if I want to make this sound like a song, it's already in me of what we can do, but then I have to kind of advance on that to not have it all just be the same stuff all the time.
That's exactly what it is. And you take stuff from your favorite bands and you see bands live and you kind of learn what not to do or what you might do, but we were always kind of spontaneous. And when we were younger too, it was always fueled by, I mean, half the band was probably drinking a lot because, you're young and that's when you first start partying. If you go that route, there was always a lot of drinking going on. We were all young. And I think there was a little bit of aggression going on, when you're drinking and trying to be like an aggressive punk band and that blah, blah, blah. And we always just try to have fun with it though. We were influenced more like by party bands at that point, like Red Hot Chili Peppers and Fishbone and like Jane's Addiction. Those are like the three, like the Hollywood, like trifecta that was going on like in 1990, was the Chili Peppers, Fishbone, and Jane's Addiction. And we were like a product of that. That was the age that we were at. We were all like a little bit younger than those people. I mean, if those people are all like 60 years old now, and I'm 53. We were under that age group, and those are the bands that were getting signed, and like the big Hollywood bands that were, filling up clubs, and they had records out already. So we were influenced by that. So we were kind of trying to sound like that and kind of be that way too.
How does this lead to you guys getting signed to Doctor Strange? Because Doctor Strange to me seems like that's the first label that's like this is our first big label.
Yeah, and it was. I mean, at first it was like, oh, they're putting out 7 inches. They put out the Guttermouth record, and we were already playing with those guys and had met those guys right around like 1990. So we meet those guys, and they put out a 7-inch, and we were like, oh wow, they have a record out. That led to their full-length record. Right at that exact time, we were all playing the same clubs and kind of playing the same places. Bill from Doctor Strange just saw us play somewhere and came up to us at that same club at Spanky's after he had seen us a few times in a few other places. And I remember meeting him and him being like, hey, I want to put out your record. Are you guys interested? And we already kind of had built our sound at that point. We were already the sound that we're known for now at that point. We already had some of those first songs or that first set of songs from that first album. And we're kind of already like, I guess, a ska punk band, like sort of. We had already kind of shrugged off the other styles. We kind of shook off some other styles. Like we were sort of a punk funk band trying to play like the Chili Peppers and like Fishbone, but like couldn't really play that way. We weren't quite as accomplished as them, of course. I mean, that's like Flea, like we couldn't play like that, but we were we kind of shook off the styles that didn't belong in our band, which is like the funk kind of element. We kind of shook off a little bit of like the metal stuff. We kind of shook off a little bit, and we kind of like found our sound, I guess, which is the sound that I guess we're sort of known for now.
Yeah, you guys have a very distinct sound. It's kind of like it's got like an edge to it, I feel. With like I do see the party element, but there's like a toughness to it.
Yeah, which is I don't know why that came into being. I mean, no one is that tough. I think we just kind of that might come from the
I feel like Frank's vocals in the beginning that was like to me when I heard it, that was the thing that made it sound like that way.
yeah, it has like a real bark to it, and I think that's the thing that came from hardcore and like metal and like the metal thing that comes with it, like the real like machismo kind of metal thing and this real like masculine sound. I think that's where he got that from is like the little bit of anger, to it.
Did people tell you that in the beginning, or did not like a negative way, but I don't know, did word get like, oh, you guys sound like the same thing I just said?
Yeah, I mean we definitely got that. We would get some comments like that here and there. It just became our sound, for better or for worse.
You guys put out your record on Doctor Strange in '93. Well, you put out Dogpile. I'm cheating because I have Discogs open, so I don't want anyone to think I'm not good at knowing all this stuff.
Oh no, it's all good. It was around 7-inch. Might have come out right at the end of '92 or at the beginning of '93, and we were already working on the record. It's from the same sessions, but yeah, it was one big recording session, if I remember right, or did we do a separate one? I think it was one session. It was like kind of the way you did things. We recorded a certain amount of songs, like 14, 15 songs, and it was like, okay, I'm gonna put out like a single with the 2 songs from the album, or one song that won't be on the album and one that will, and that's kind of how you did things.
Yeah, people are kind of doing that now a little bit again.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they just use Spotify. They're not. Well, then they'll do that, and then they'll put it on like a 7-inch now, not like anything like that.
Yeah, it's kind of this going back to that model, but except with all the like with the digital platforms, and then you might get vinyl if you find some kind of vinyl deal or something. You do vinyl at some point. We signed with him, or I mean, it wasn't technically like a sign. I don't even remember if we signed anything. I think we might have signed some little basic contract with him, and then it was like cut and dry deals back then. It was like, I'll pay for the cost of I'll pay for the cost of everything, for the advertising, and once I recoup my costs, I'll start splitting everything with you guys. That was basically what it was.
So I interviewed Bill, and he had nothing but great things to say about you guys, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's good to know. His book just came out, and he the part about Face to Face and Guttermouth, I don't know if you read the book.
Well, so in the interview, he goes off on Face to Face, and he goes off on Mark from Guttermouth, and
yeah, Mark. Yeah, he probably hates Mark and Jamie.
Yeah, I was like, wow, dude.
I just read the book. My side band, one of our side bands just played at his record store last weekend, or the weekend before last. He gave me the book just like 2 weeks ago. Gave me the book, and I had forgotten about it, and someone gave it to me on our drive up to play a Voodoo show the weekend after, which was last week. And I started reading the book, had no idea, and I get to that chapter, and I'm like, damn, I'm so glad that there's nothing bad about us. Not that there would be, but I was like, man, I'm glad to be on the right side of history with that one, because I remember when all that stuff went down, not to talk about those bands and that drama, but we were there. We were living it. We were right there next to those bands. So I remember when all that shit went down, the way he says it. It's just weird to hear details that I didn't know.
I think I can leave this in because he's in this book, and I haven't read it yet. But does he talk about the real reason why he hates Face to Face in the book?
Yeah, well, as far as I know, I mean, there's 2 main reasons, but the main reasons are because they both those bands basically took the records that he put out.
Right, and they became the fat.
Yeah, they just took them away from him on top of like moving. See, we kind of, I think, did it the right way. It's like we got signed to Epitaph, but it was like, how are you going to argue with that? We didn't have a contract with Bill for a second album or anything. It was kind of a friendship deal. And it was like we got enough interest because of the first album that he put out to take us all the way to Epitaph Records, which is like a kind of like signing to a major at that point. He understood. I'm sure he wasn't like the happiest about it, it was like we did things, I guess, sort of right, the way you would expect to do it. But the one thing we didn't do is take the record away from him and go, okay. And on top of that, fuck you, we're gonna take the record and give it to Brett and put it on put it on an Epitaph. So that would have been a full like opportunist move, which we didn't do. We stuck to our guns and let him have that record. And it wasn't until like he wasn't active at all with the record label, like almost 20 years later, 25 years later, that we were like, dude, we want to put this out with Asian Man Records for a pressing because he wants to press it. Is that cool? And it was totally fine. But at that point, he wasn't active at all. There was no record label. So we kind of did things right, and then we were responsible for resuscitating, like his whole thing by putting out our last album and then doing a reissue of Who Is This Is.
Yeah, and then just to jump forward, didn't he redo that recently?
Yes.
2022?
That's about right. Yep.
Okay, because I did read that, and I saw that you guys redid something with him. I was like, oh, it's cool. Yeah, I mean, like I said, he was like, spoke highly of you guys. When I got in the punk scene, it was like around 96, just because my friends were in it, and they were buying all these records. So Face to Face was huge, No Effects, Pennywise. Then later on, it was all emo stuff, but Doctor Strange was on our radar. So it seems like around that time, that was a good name to have behind you if you were on tour.
Yeah, I mean, it was already good to be associated. I mean, it carried you more because he had real distribution. He had pretty good distribution for a small indie label of that, I guess, at that level. He had good distribution right off the bat. We already had records like in Europe and stuff.
What was it like to hear that you had a record in Europe when you're that age?
Oh, it just blows you away because you don't, especially then. I mean, now it's just like easier to reach people, but then it was just kind of unfathomable. It's like, are you kidding me? We're getting mail from Germany.
So cool.
You know what I mean? Or from the UK. So, and then, it was like back then it was just like Maxim Rock and Roll and like Flipside Magazine. There was like scene reports. So you would kind of hear about stuff that was written or, like see stuff. It wasn't like it is now, man. Of course, it's a totally different world now. It's almost, but 35, like 30 years later. So it's a different thing. But, yeah, it was pretty wild, man, to just, I mean, like I was saying, even to get fan mail from like a person in the next town over was crazy that had our demo. I mean, let alone somebody has like a full on, like a vinyl LP of yours with your picture on it, the artwork that you chose, songs that you wrote. It was just, it blew me away.
Chris, I get a fucking email from someone now from wherever, and it blows my mind. I'm like, what? You took the time to fucking write this? This is amazing.
Yeah. Oh no, it's great. I mean, it's still cool. I mean, that stuff's still cool. Even I mean, you take it for granted, a little bit because you could look at your band Instagram and you're like, oh, we got 10 more followers, and you don't realize how it's a big deal. It's just, I think people take it for granted. Oh, I'm just gonna like or unlike or follow or unfollow, like it's casual. But think about all the work you used to have to put in to tell people you like. It's just so wild to me.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, those likes are like taken for granted kind of now. I hate to say that, but it's just like, oh, someone liked a photo. It's just so weird.
Yeah, I mean, it is cool when people do message you because they just you see the effort they're putting into it, and they just write you, even if it's like a sentence or two, but it's like a paragraph or two. You're like, holy shit, man! Like this is definitely doing for somebody. When so around like '94, you guys, is this when you guys start touring?
We had toured before that. We actually cut our teeth on some like really DIY tours. We put out our first 7-inch before the Doctor Strange stuff around 90, 91. We put out a 6-song 7-inch we met these dudes in a band at the same club at the Spanky's Café Club. We met this band called Public Humiliation. Their band was the way the name of the band sounds. They kind of would go up on stage and kind of humiliate themselves. They were like sort of like the Dead Milkmen kind of style, quirky, kind of jokey, kind of joke songs. They had like songs about pizza and just songs about just weird shit. They kind of already knew how to put out vinyl. Like we didn't know that world yet. We were kind of new to DIY because we had just started this band, and these guys came up to us and were like, we want to put out your 7-inch. And like, they knew how to do it already. So these guys paid for our first record to come out. They also booked our first tour. It was right when like Book Your Own, like that magazine, Book Your Own Life.
Book Your Own fucking life.
Thing. Yep. That was like that fanzine was about to be a thing. It wasn't even a thing yet, but it was about to be a thing. So we kind of booked our first tours that way through these guys that were in this band. The band was from Berkeley, and he was already like one of the guys was like a Gilman volunteer, so he kind of knew how it worked. He booked our first tour like on these like information cards, like flashcards that you buy. He just would have flashcards for every city and all the information on the flashcards. It was kind of cool. It was like like he was ahead of his time. He had like sort of like a Rolodex of flashcards and booked our tour that way by calling people and sending out 7 inches and cassette demos and like little Xerox bios of us. And we ended up with a couple little tours that way. So we did 2 tours. We did one tour that went to like Texas and back, and then one tour that went up to like the Pacific Northwest and back.
So was this the 7-inch, the Old of Tomorrow EP on Goon Records?
That's it. And the Goon Records guys was just these 2 guys from this band. It was actually one guy that actually did most of the work, but the band Public Humiliation put out a couple 7-inches of their friends' bands, and they put out our first 7-inch, which is that one. That's kind of what started it, man. We booked a couple tours in a van, like small little van tours, playing like in roller rinks and in basements and shit like that. Had a couple good shows, and we were already sort of building a little following and had some interest like right off the bat. And then that led to like a third tour, and the third tour was more of a proper tour, like where we had the Doctor Strange stuff out. Like we had the 7-inch out, I think, in maybe that first album. The same guy kind of helped us book like a more of a proper like a 5-week tour. We went out for like 5 weeks. That was like the mother load. That was like, oh shit, like we're doing a real tour. That was the beginning of it. And that led to like a tour with the Bosstones a couple years after that, where it was like the first real tour where we like were the band that was selling out shows and playing theaters and shit like that.
I just have to imagine, because it says on Discogs that The Old of Tomorrow comes out in '90, and that's when you do your first tour. Like you said you do 2 tours, and then from there you kind of just, as the years go on, it grows. '93 you get on Doctor Strange, you put on Dogpile, and then you put out, let's see what else. Who Is This Is on Doctor Strange in '94. Because the entire timeline of the '90s, early '90s, it's where around Nirvana comes out, grunge comes out, and there's that whole thing. Then like fucking the Seattle alternative shit, and then punk's kind of this underlying thing, and all of a sudden it peeks its head out eventually because Green Day and Rancid and Offspring. So it's like you guys are kind of like just growing as a band, and then the things happening around you are opening up more people's eyes to you. So by the time like '94 comes around, I can imagine where you're like, oh, this is like working for us. And then that obviously sustains until like the late '90s, where it really starts to break open with Warped Tour. So that's got to be crazy. Like, did you have a feeling, and it's hard to, I don't know if you can answer this, but in like '94 when you're out with Who Is This Is, and are you like, oh, this is fucking working for us right now, this whole scene?
Well, yeah, I mean, you don't. I guess we were a little bit younger and kind of, we were partying and kind of not paying attention to every single thing, but we were, yeah. I mean, it was an obvious thing. Like we were already doing pretty well, and there was interest wherever we went in the band. Like it was kind of surprising because we just didn't know. Yeah, I mean, it was kind of working. Like the sound was interesting to people because that wasn't a thing yet. There wasn't like, I don't know, you name the bands now, but it wasn't like Streetlight Manifesto or ska bands with horns weren't even like a thing. It was like, there was only a couple of us, I guess you could say. There was a handful, it was like Fishbone.
Skank and Pickle eventually.
Yeah, Fishbone, exactly. I mean, Skank and Pickle was kind of responsible for us getting our first booking agent.
Oh,
so
really?
we have a lot of ties with Mike too, because Mike Park heard about us right around the same time when we were, it was like, oh, you're a ska punk band too. It was kind of like that thing where the internet wasn't a thing yet. So you were just like, oh, that band has a 7-inch out too, or has a cassette. So we heard about Skank and Pickle, and right when our Doctor Strange stuff was kind of bubbling under, Skank and Pickle was a thing in the Bay Area. So we meet Mike Park, I think at Gilman Street. He was responsible for us getting our first booking agency, which is the Tahoe agency, which was like I mean, they're responsible for Sublime, Blink-182, Less Than Jake, Skanking Pickle, Voodoo Glow Skulls. It was a place to be like in '93. All those bands, I mean, now that would be like somebody's dream roster in a way. I mean, Skanking Pickle and Voodoo would be the small bands, but I mean, come on, Blink and Sublime, they were all basically little baby club bands, and we were all like on the same roster for, like for that point. And that was all because of Mike Park. Mike is the one that talked to Rick Bondi was the guy's name. And he was our first booking agent. He was the first dude that said, okay, I'm a booking agent. If you guys are interested in the real deal, this is what I do. I mean, I could do this and do this and that for you.
Real quick, if you're looking for an explainer video or someone to do motion graphics for your company, check out my company, drive80.com, and you can email me at mike@drive80.com for more info. That's all I got to say. So now back to the interview. When was ska really started to peek its head out? Like there was a third wave of ska, I guess is what people called it, in the mid 90s. Like 96 is where it was like, all right, we know what this is. And that's like, that really blows up.
Yeah. I mean, if you ask me, I mean, and this is obviously, I was a part of it. So, I mean, obviously I'm biased to the whole thing, but I think the bands that are kind of responsible for that wave are basically the bands I mentioned. It was the Bosstones on the East Coast, Skankin' Pickle and Voodoo on the West Coast.
Slapstick in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, Slapstick kind of was doing a Chicago thing. Yeah, I mean, that was it. As far as like bigger names or bands that sold like, like we had already. I think the first Doctor Strange record sold like 20,000 pretty quick. So we were like, what? It was like we couldn't believe it. You know what I mean? So it was one of those things where it was like a runaway train for us in a way. We didn't get the benefits of some of those bands that signed to majors, but I mean, a direct product of, I mean, we signed to Epitaph. That pretty much was the major label signing for us. That's what made us, I guess, who we are, or at least kind of solidified. I was like, oh, okay, now you're in with the big boys. Now it's sink or swim. Now you could have a record that could stand the test of time.
Was that intimidating when you guys got on that label?
Oh yeah, I was going through all kinds of anxiety and stress stuff at that point because it was like a whirlwind for us. We were on Doctor Strange. We had a little record store. We had a DIY punk store here in town. It was all like snowball effect kind of stuff. We did our first tours. Well, here's the way it went down. We put out Who Is This Is, did a couple DIY tours, not that many, only like one or two tours, and then got asked to do a Bosstones support tour. So we got asked to do the Bosstones support tour for Question the Answers. I think it was an album that came out like in '94. So it was the Bosstones' first major label album. We get asked to support that leg of the U.S. tour. So we go out with them and see our first taste of like, oh, this is the first time I've seen a band touring in a bus and like playing in a theater, and it sold out. It was that kind of stuff. That tour goes down. We get home from that, and Brett Gurewitz from Bad Religion and from Epitaph calls our record store and goes, hi, I'm trying to find a member of the Voodoo Glow Skulls. I heard you guys work here or run this shop. It was just a cold call. He talks to my older brother, Frank, and it was like, that was a guy from Epitaph Records. That was Brett, and he wants to sign the band. So it was just like a snowball effect. Like that all happened like within that year. So it went from that to getting signed to Epitaph to getting courted by some major labels at that time too. Because we, on top of talking to Epitaph, we were talking to like A&M Records, talking to MCA Records. We were talking to Roadrunner Records. We even had a couple lunches. Like it wasn't like the Green Day thing where it was a bidding war, but we went out to a couple lunches. We went out to a couple major label lunches and met with reps. Just we're like, oh, this isn't really for us. As soon as like they and our rep mentioned us changing the style a little bit or slowing down the music, we're like, nope. That's not going to happen.
What were your requirements when you went into those meetings as a group? You're like, okay, this is what we wanted. They break out of this. We're saying no.
Well, I mean, we kind of didn't know. Well, we had the stereotypical conversation, which was the way I thought it would be in my head. I want to say it was with a guy from MCA Records. I forget his name, but it was an A&R guy that flew out to see us in Santa Cruz. And I remember going to eat lunch. The whole band went to go eat lunch with this guy. in Santa Cruz, and it was like the typical, like the major label kind of meeting, what you kind of expect the way it happens for bands, like in a dream sequence or something. It was like, we did a sound check. The guy shows up, has all these like, his way with words sort of thing, takes us to go eat at some place down the street. We all walk to go eat somewhere. And we're just like, all of a sudden we're kind of having like a not official, but official meeting with some dude. And he's kind of telling us what they could do for us kind of thing. And it was like, kind of like the way he said it, but he said a couple of key things. It was like, well, if you guys kind of slowed this down and we got this producer to come in and work with you. And the way he said a couple of things, we were already looking at each other like, we're going to sign to Epitaph Records. Because it was like, we're going to just get to do what we want. As far as music goes, the attitude was like, I'm not going to fuck with your shit.
When you go with Epitaph, you said you started to stress out. Was that during the whole courting thing, or once it was definitive that you were going to be on Epitaph?
Oh, it was definitely once we were signed and we were going to have to, we were going to have to deliver. So I remember feeling the pressure as a songwriter of like, man, we're going to be in the same leagues as NoFX and as Bad Religion and Rancid and Pennywise and The Offspring. The Offspring at that point was like a multi-platinum band for them. They were like a multi-platinum band that just took off out of left field. Like at that point, I remember Brett, because we were around Brett a lot and we were hearing all the little details and stuff going on in the background. And at that point, Pennywise was their biggest seller, and they had sold like 90,000 records or 80,000 records, or like just under 100,000. And they were like planning a Pennywise party to celebrate them right when the Offspring started to take off. So it's like the Offspring had this like runaway, huge like K-Rock hit. It was kind of weird for them because they're planning this like Pennywise like milestone release party, but they were finding out that Offspring was going to go gold any minute or something. So it was just weird times, man.
I thought I heard something recently. I could have this totally wrong. I thought like Offspring that first year or wherever it was sold like 3 million copies or something. I don't know.
That sounds right.
Yeah, I thought that was crazy. So it's funny when you said that Pennywise is celebrating 90,000 and then they're like, yeah, we have 3 million. They're like, holy fuck, dude.
Yeah, because that's how it works. They obviously find out ahead of time, like, oh, we need to ship this many records. So they were literally planning like the Pennywise party and finding out that Offspring was going to go gold in a couple months. Or it was like that kind of talk. So they were just like, wow, it was all happening. And we were literally like, okay, time to go do your demo for your album. It was like that for us. We were like, kind of like around I think NoFX, like White Trash 2 Heaps and a Bean was out. Pennywise, the second album was out about time. That one was blowing up for them at the time. So they had that song Homesickness. That was like that was as big as Pennywise had gotten at that point. And that was like right under 100,000 copies or 75,000 copies or something, which was huge at that time, but not, platinum. So it was, and then, I think the Rancid self-titled and maybe Let's Go was out. So all this was going on and we were signing to Epitaph. And it was like, okay, you're going to go in to West Beach Recorders and do a demo for the album. They just wanted to hear what they were going to get, but they didn't really do anything to our demo. It was like the demo could have been the album pretty much. They didn't do like the major label thing with a producer going, okay, now we got to change the tempos and rewrite this. And it was none of that. It was like kind of more like, okay, we just want to hear what you guys got. But we were already signed.
So if you look back, is it firm or Fermi? Firme?
Firme, yeah.
Firme, okay. And so the first two records you do, okay, it's a two-part question. The first part is, if you look back at those two records, what are your thoughts on them personally?
First two Epitaph records?
Yeah.
I think everything happened the way it should have went down. Like I stand by them. Like though, there's a reason why we could still tour around the world because of mostly those records.
Well, do you like them personally?
Yeah. I still like them. I mean, I don't go back and listen as much because it's just weird to sit down and listen to your own music after a while. Like I don't know who does that, but I mean, I'll go back and reference now if we want to relearn, which we're actually relearning stuff now to play live, like old, like kind of like this B-side obscure songs we never play off those records. We're trying to like play them all again. That's the only way I'll go back now is to reference stuff. But when I have heard it, I'm like, oh, like I stand by them. For the time, it being what it was, even for now, because I know what's out there now. I kind of produce and record a lot of bands here at my house. I record ska punk. That's kind of my business. I record ska punk bands a lot now. And so I know what's going on in the scene now. I know who the bands are in the scene that are a thing now. Yeah, I still stand by those albums that made us who we are for what it is. You know what I mean? And I take it for what it's worth. You know what I mean? Sure, you go back and you go, oh, maybe that guitar tone is cringy or that lyric could have been different or something, but not so much, man. I still stand by what we did, and I hear the influence now when I hear the young bands out there doing that style.
I guess the second part was because you said you went into it stressed. My second question was like, looking back, do you think that the stress that you had made those records what they were? Not in a negative way, but like, for what you like.
I think so. I mean, I would hope so. I mean,
Like it helped elevate them to where you think you wouldn't have been without the stress.
I think so. I mean, it was real bad for me. Like that was like, I mean, if I could explain it, I mean, it's kind of personal stuff, but man, I was like, I had to like go see like a psychologist and a psychiatrist for that stuff. Like it was like lose sleep and have migraine headaches type of stuff. It wasn't just like, oh, normal stress. I didn't know what was going on with me at the time. And it ended up being that it was just anxiety and like a little bit of depression mixed in with that. Just stuff going on in your life. I think at that point it was like around 95, it was what, 23. It was a lot of pressure. Like I was feeling the pressure of like, man, that's the Offspring is a big band now. And we're like on the same label as No Effects. Those are like my heroes, at that time. So I was definitely feeling like the pressure of like, man, we're in the same leagues as Fat Mike. You know what I mean? It's like, that was wild to us. To me, that was like, we're on the same label that put out Punk and Drublick. That's crazy to me. That was like that was like our favorite shit. I definitely felt that pressure enough to where I had to, go seek help to calm the fuck down. I was the guy writing the songs from the guitar point of view. Cause it wasn't like, I mean, people might have these, preconceived notions when they see the album covers or hear the songs, but it wasn't like, oh, the saxophone player's writing all the songs. It was like the dudes with the guitars are. It was definitely that pressure of wanting to be as good as your favorite bands, straight up.
Did the stress go before you, went and got help and everything and really talked it out? When you would finish a record, did you find that the stress would alleviate and you're like, okay, we could just go play the music and it's less stressful?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure of that. Yeah, I mean, once where it was like, oh, we could breathe now. Oh, this people like the record, or it's getting a lot of love. I mean, those first couple of Epitaph records got a lot of love, man. We were really fortunate that we were considered in the same leagues as those bands at that point. Once the album came out, it kind of took off for us, and we were able to, first time we were able to go to Europe, and it kind of took off for us. We had a video, we had some love like from like MTV 120 Minutes and like little things that kind of made you feel like, oh, it's leveling up. It's like it's all next level.
So basically, like, you stay on Epitaph from 95 all the way up through 2000 from what it's showing me. And this is where ska like literally like blows up and then all of a sudden it becomes kind of like what's the word? People just really start shitting on it eventually.
Yeah, it got written off quick.
It was almost like you became a ska band. Propaganda puts out Ska Sucks, and then people were like, "Oh, let's pay attention to that." And then all of a sudden, it really then turns into the screamo and all that stuff. So in that whole thing, like, did that affect you guys at all?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
oh yeah, we were affected by it. We were, you go from like 95. Well, I mean, it's like it was like anything else, I guess. I mean, nobody stays on top, and not that we were even on top.
But as a genre, though, that was on top. That was huge.
No, that was on top, and it basically it seemed like it got watered down by the radio, straight up. Like that's what people relied on at the time, especially. K-Rock ruled the world at that time. They were that station here in LA is responsible for like, or was for how many of the stations in like the world? There was like a crazy amount of stations that they influence all over the world. Their playlist is a big deal. And, it got watered down so much to where it became kind of a joke to people. And like the word ska was in every band's title, every band's name. All of a sudden there was like ska this and ska that. And there was ska and like commercials and blah, blah, blah. And it was weird for us because we were always kind of like the bastardized version of even the radio shit. Like we weren't really meant to be the commercial one. That was like for Real Big Fish and No Doubt to do, or like for the Bosstones to do. We weren't the impression that I get or the sellout band. We were the band that put out Friedman. We were kind of like the band, kind of like the hardcore version of that stuff still. We got kind of like, we didn't get as much shit kind of because we had our 1 foot like in the underground still. So that's kind of what's almost saved us in a way, I would say, is that we could kind of still fly under the radar and be Voodoo Glow Skulls still. We were able to still, I mean, we got some backlash and it wasn't as popular anymore for sure, but we still kind of maintained a steady, somewhat of like a career.
Well, I mean, you guys are still playing too,
Yeah, we kind of kept it real. We kind of like we were actually kept it so real that we signed to the biggest emo label when it wasn't cool to be ska punk. We signed to Victory. And that was like, if anything, it was like, what are you doing signing us? Like they were putting out Thursday records.
Wait, did you think they were an emo label? I mean, they started off hardcore, but I guess you're right. They did go on that whole like Hawthorne.
Well, I mean, he's
hype and
responsible for Thursday and Taking Back Sunday. He's
shit.
responsible.
True.
He's responsible for the Days of the Week bands. Those Taking Back Sunday. Well, that's what we called it.
That's
Like
so
he was
funny.
responsible for the Days of the Week bands because everyone was a Sunday or a Thursday or a Monday band. We were, and we were. I mean, we were the band that was making fun of that. It was the joke was on us because Thursday, got bought out of their contract for like $1 million or whatever it was at that point, or whatever was going on with those bands, and same with Taking Back Sunday. And we were like, oh, wait a minute, we could still play Gilman and we could still play in front of 200 of our same fans. Great. Not that much had changed for us to be fair.
So before I want to jump into Victory, but before that, when the ska bands are getting on TV and it started to get big, and then you guys are playing shows and looking around being like, this isn't really working for us. Did you have a little, I would say animosity is kind of a strong word, but I'll just use it. Like, did you have any animosity towards the bands that were on TV to be like, this is really fucking with us right now? You guys are ruining this for us.
I'm sure there was probably some attitudes here and there, but we were, there's always like camaraderie with bands, and we were always kind of more of that band to me. We were all about some of those bands, and we were like, cool, good stuff's happening for people playing that have a horn section. Because that's like, I mean, horn sections that kind of come and go like throughout time, if you ask me. Like, I'm sure like in the 70s, there was like Earth, Wind, and Fire, and like that was a thing. Bands like Boston and shit. And then it wasn't a thing in like the 80s, I'd say maybe there wasn't a thing for a while. And then it came back in the 90s, and then the 2000s, it wasn't a thing. And then all of a sudden, Streetlight Manifesto in 2010 sells out the Will Turn. So it's like, it comes and goes. I'm sure there was something. I mean, we knew the Bosstones, so we were happy for them. I think the cheesy element was kind of like fucked with us a little bit. Ska became extra cheesy, cheese stick type of stuff. And we were, it was a little bit of an attitude of like, well, that's kind of fucking with our shit a little bit because but then again, you're in your own world too. I mean, we kind of always had our own little niche. Like the Real Big Fish kids didn't necessarily like the voodoo sound, but there's still crossover there. There's still some degree of crossover there that you can't deny.
When you guys go in Victory, I'm just thinking there's a whole bunch of shit happening. A, ska is getting a beat down. B, it's the scene's turning into fucking all the emo, like, this whole new element. Downloading starting to happen. So it's kind of like all of this stuff I feel like is working against a lot of bands. But with you, and then you guys go on Victory, getting on that label at that time, I don't know, like what drove you in that direction? Because were you thinking, well, their previous book is hardcore bands like Strife, Snapcase, Earth Crisis, and they have a harder sound, and then like that was maybe where this is going to work for us?
Oh yeah. I mean, we kind of had a little bit of. Well, it was also the thing of also being on another like a hot label. Like I mean, if you really break it down, I mean, Victory was the hot label in 2002 or in 2004. They were kind of like the new Epitaph, and Tony, like the owner, he straight up wanted Epitaph bands. Like he wanted to be Brett Gurewitz straight up. Like he wanted what Brett had. He modeled all of his shit kind of the same way, even down to where Victory moved to, like eventually, like they moved into like some kind of artsy loft space in Chicago that really resembled the Epitaph building, even some old building with a classic old elevator, like looked like the mob used to own the building back in the 20s. It was like he did kind of what Epitaph did. Once he got some money, he got this crazy loft kind of art space, like in the sort of nicer part of Chicago, I think. And like, I think it was a nice part of Chicago, at least, where we went to go visit. And it was like, dude, it's like Epitaph all over again. Felt like Richie Rich showing you all of his toys. Oh, I have a fancy screen, like a screen printing department. And I have the art department. And I got all my employees are in these fancy cubicle loft kind of desks. And like, it was the same shit, dude. He was kind of like reading from the playbook of those business books that were out at the time, like where they make all their employees wear the same Nikes and all that stuff. He was kind of on that trip. He was all over that, like, what's it called? Think and Grow Rich. Which, I'm about some of those vibes too. I want to be successful in my own right, but he was totally going from that playbook. I think he even like bought all of his employees the same shoes. I think he even did that shit, dude.
I'll have to find that out. I actually interviewed someone who worked there, and she gave kind of like some behind the scenes stories of just, I don't want to say the disasters, but like just like all right, this is where Tony got a little hot headed about shit.
Oh, we were, I mean, we were from out here, obviously, but the few times we came through town and went to meet up with him, totally that vibe. Like he had like the I want to be Brett Gurewitz, like Epitaph Records thing going on big time. And that was part of what he did. If you notice, he signed us and he signed 10 Foot Pole, two Epitaph bands from the 90s, from that same era. And maybe some other ones I'm not thinking of, but he almost said it out loud. Like he wanted Epitaph bands. He was sort of a Voodoo fan and had come to see us play like at the Fireside Bowl when we were on Epitaph still. So he showed interest. Like I think from what I could gather, he had some kind of modicum of respect for us. There was something, I think he was just into the band a little bit, like maybe into what we were doing, because he came out to a couple of shows way before we were on Victory, met up with us at the bar there and talked, like, I mean, he would chat us up. And I think he was interested in what was going on with Brett and with the way he did his label. So that was a product of us, I think, getting signed. I think that was kind of, he wanted the Epitaph bands.
What was the difference between the way he talked to you before he signed you and the way he talked to you after he signed you?
Not that much different. He was like going from that playbook, like I said, like really inspirational, like kind of motivational speaker vibes, but not cheesy. We would see right through that shit. We had already been through a couple of things at that point. So we're the kind of people that would definitely be cynical and see through it. Like if it was something weird about it. And I honestly thought he was pretty genuine. He didn't seem like he couldn't have been after too much because we weren't selling that many records at that point. So I just think he was just trying to build his label and have, I think, bands he respected, I want to say, or just bands he was into, maybe.
Maybe he was like pulling bands like to give him cred.
Yeah, that was the vibe too. And he always seemed, I remember going to his office once he had the success already and had already moved to the building and had already I think I'd already been sued by like Thursday or one of those bands. For sure, the Name of the Week bands that were like both suing him. I think he was getting sued at that point. I think Hatebreed was his big seller too at that point, and they were blowing up. And that was kind of part of the reason why we wanted to be there. We were definitely into Strife because we knew Strife and had toured with Strife. So we knew Strife pretty well because they're from out here. Already knew Snapcase and already toured with them on the Warped Tour and had a lot of respect for those bands. That was kind of our shit at that point. We always experimented with hardcore. We had already dipped our toes into that. We were already fans of those bands, and we're kind of even aware of like, oh, we're on Victory. We could kind of actually dabble with more with hardcore, kind of almost get away from any third wave sounding ska thing. We were actively trying to just be more of what we always set out to be, is like kind of our own thing, a little bit more aggressive, still keep the horns, focus a little bit less on the ska influence, and go back to more of our roots, which is like punk rock and like hardcore.
Well, I mean, seems like you must have had a decent run because you did 3 releases with them.
Yeah, we had a okay run and sold some records. Not anything too crazy, but it reminded me of like the Who Is This Is Doctor Strange era. We were like selling like 30,000, 25,000 records, 20,000 records. So we weren't bummed. We were able to tour with that, have somewhat of a, like an international following with those kind of numbers. And that was still kind of that was kind of like the days of like LimeWire and like Kazaa or something. We weren't really like, it wasn't like the internet now with Spotify and fucking Apple Music and YouTube or anything.
Did you when did you start to notice that affecting your wallet when like the downloading?
Probably that era, 2005, 6. We noticed like royalty checks getting smaller, and it was just changing.
Were you like making calls to the label saying like what the fuck, or you just go, oh shit, we get it?
Yeah, you just kind of get it, especially when you're at our level, which wasn't really like, we always rode that fine line at that point of like, you can make a living off music if you know how to live, or if you have a side hustle, or just go get a full-time job and don't do music. You know what I mean? It was like either or if you knew how to balance stuff. So we were always kind of working class more than like fully able to just live off it like maybe the guy in Pennywise can. It was a little different for us. We were already having to figure out what we were going to do and do our band. So we were already used to like that, where it wasn't like, oh, we don't have to solely rely on the band anyways.
When did you guys start to kind of pull away from making it your main focus, like in all of your lives?
Well, you mostly see it with like band member changes, but the core 4 guys in the band that started the band stayed with it pretty far. I mean, we were pretty hyper focused on the band the whole time, no matter what we were doing. We were staying with it. I started to record bands to make money, and basically built a recording studio, like bought equipment to have a studio in my home, because I kind of had the means and like the right building for it. I had like a detached garage in my house that was perfectly set up already, and it was already kind of a rehearsal space and looked like a recording studio. So I was already doing that like in the early 2000s, and already figuring out what I was going to do for like a side hustle or for like a job. You know what I mean? So we were already all kind of doing stuff, whether some of us had jobs or we're just doing other things to make money. That was already like a thing.
When you started doing that, did you decide, because you said you're a ska like recording studio, ska punk recording studio, has that always been your model, or did that kind of change to that recently?
It's become more of a thing because of Voodoo Glow Skulls. I think that's who kind of calls me, is those kind of bands. But I record all kinds of stuff. But but it's mostly like, I would say like punk rock scene, kind of that whole world. Which to me, the umbrella of like punk rock or that DIY scene is all that stuff. Ska, punk, anything hardcore, like bands that are metal but kind of underground. I get kind of all that stuff.
When you're like recording these bands and like hearing them talk about now and like the lives that they're leading with these bands, like how, like for sitting back and listening to it, do you see the similarities of what you went through, or is it a whole new world where you're like, man, I would not want to be starting right now?
It's a little bit of both. It's still cool to watch bands be excited about their songs and about their music. And I remember being that dude. I'm still that dude. I still get excited about the new idea that we're about to record and stuff like that. But then again, I don't envy some of the stuff. Yeah, it's easier to be seen because of the internet, but it's like everyone could be seen now. So the filter's a wide lens or whatever now. the scope is so big now, whereas before it was like you had to find stuff. Now, not to sound mean or cynical, but there's a lot more shit you have to sift through to get through the good stuff, I think.
Oh, totally, dude. I always say about do you listen to Spotify? Do you use that to listen to music?
No, but I'm aware of it. I just happen to be like an Apple Music guy.
Oh, okay. Like they probably have a similar thing where Spotify has a Discover Weekly where it's like, for the algorithms based on the music you like, here's 20 bands and
Here's 20 ska punk bands or whatever. Yeah.
yeah, it's like whatever. It's like I have a playlist that I listen to, and it's all over the place. I mean, it goes back to like Fleetwood Mac all the way up to fucking Circa Survive and shit like that. And if these bands though, like your point, I'll have 20 of them, and like maybe one of them I'm like, all right, and then sometimes I'm like, oh, this is a fucking banger, but it's I'm just like, I mean, obviously back then too, you have bands starting off, they had demo tapes that didn't get out, so there was a lot of music, but it wasn't accessible to listen to all that shit to be like, there's a lot of crap out here.
Yeah, well, the arguments are kind of real, and I guess I don't hate to say it, but I hate to say it in a way because it was a thing back then. But like Lars from Metallica was right. Those guys were right. They were totally fucking right about it taking away from the income of people that give a shit. Not that some new band doesn't give a shit, but it's like, I don't know, like maybe the label filter and the A&R guy deciding who the talent was might have been a good thing. I mean, maybe there was like tastemakers for a reason. Now the filter is just wide open, like I said, to where, I could have a band next week and record it in a week and put it on Spotify myself. Who's the judge of whether it's good or not? I guess the public. So it's like, it's a really open scope now of like stuff you have to sift through where it really makes just stuff less important.
I mean, if you're oversaturated in any aspect, it just kind of takes away from, I think, the core essence of what it is.
Yeah, I think it kind of cheapened it. It cheapened everything. It made music kind of disposable and cheap and kind of easy to get to. And it's like, yeah, the access is great, but you're gonna have access to so much stuff to go through to find maybe the good. Not that we're the good. It was in '95, and there's still those bands there. Of course there is. There's new talented bands, and there's some diamond in the rough right now being carved out as we speak, I'm sure, somewhere. Yeah, dude. I mean, I really think it probably cheapened everything and it made stuff less valuable. It made music less important in a way. I mean, it's still important to me. It's obviously important to you, but maybe people aren't so quick to go find stuff anymore. Kind of has to fall on your lap in a way too.
Yeah, I mean, I'll put a little bit more effort into it when I'm on Spotify. I'm like, all right, let me dig a little bit because I have found a lot of good bands. But they do say I read something where it's like the older you get, I don't know how they said it. It's like you like new stuff less for some reason. Like you can't get excited about it as you did when you were younger.
Yeah, and there has to be something to it. Just I can just tell by like the new ideas. I mean, I'm still in that mode, man. I'm still that dude that's like 1992, 93 writing their first album. Like I'm still searching for that Voodoo Glow Skulls song. That next one. As funny as it may sound, 36 years later, I'm in that mode right now. I'm literally like sifting through demos now, going over vocals and lyrics, going over parts, just figuring out what the next stuff's going to be. But then again, I go, oh yeah, the world's different now. Like I get reminded still of like my age or like how old the band is or like just everything or the way the world works now. I'm like, oh yeah, the world's different now. Like, but I'm still caught up being that same dude being excited about those next 10 songs.
But that's cool, man. Like I think that's the problem is that people are a little jaded from that. But because no one wants to put time into anything, because it's the TikTok mind of you get 5 seconds of my time and I'm on to the new thing.
Oh yeah, and it's still that way. It's that way a little bit. Like I'm influenced by the new school of, oh shit, I could walk in my backyard 20 yards away and make a demo that sounds like a record now. Pretty much without any other people playing it, I could pretty much almost record a whole album now with a drum machine, and it sounds pretty damn close. It's like, oh, you want Green Day drums? Here they are. Sounds like Green Day drums. Like I literally do that now, but there's something to it though. I'm still waiting for the good, like not willing to just put any old thing out. Like if it takes another 10 years to make another Voodoo record, then so be it. But there's still hope, man. There's hope. We're sitting on at least 2 or 3 out of I have about 25 songs right now. But like, hey man, there's 3 or 4, 2 or 3 fucking bangers that I would put out tomorrow. That's promising. Like that there's still that spark. There's still that spark of excitement to where like, dang, I'm still excited for people that are into this band to hear song A, B, and C. You know, there's still those songs that are like, oh, there's still that spark where it's like, oh yeah, it's still there. Like there's going to be a new record at some point or singles. And like, I fully stand by them like the stuff in 1995. That's still a thing. And I'm grateful for that because I could just be jaded. You know, half of my mind is the way it still works the way you're saying now, where it's like you get older and things don't taste as good to you anymore. You know what I mean? It's like, it's the same. That's definitely there where I'm like, fuck, how come I'm not excited about these 15 other demos that sound cool? They still sound cool. There's something there, but I just can't get as excited about these as these other 3 or whatever. You know,
Well, you're young, you don't have as much information in your brain, so everything's new and exciting. When you're old, you have so much fucking information that you're comparing it to shit. Or you're like, heard this before. Fuck, nothing sounds new.
yeah, and that's exactly what goes on, and that's what I'm going through now in a sense. Like I'm still trying to fight that. I'm trying to fight that, and like it's like, do you let some stuff slide and go, well, don't be so jaded, don't be so set in your ways too. Like just try different things, let stuff come out that you're not sure about. You know, so it's a weird thing, man. You know, trying to be creative after you've been so creative for so long. You know, but yeah, it's a weird thing. But yeah, I think the filter's wide open now. Like you have to go through so much to get to stuff because it's so accessible and it's great. Like, but the other thing is, I don't want to sound like one of those old jaded guys too, because I mean, how awesome it is that some little band could just record easier now and convey their ideas out there now a lot quicker and a lot cheaper now. And some kid could become a hip hop artist if he's talented enough and has the means, could do everything by himself now. That's fucking cool. That's, in a sense, that's punk rock in itself. You know what I mean? But yeah, you have to just kind of ride that fine line, dude, of embrace that stuff that we're talking about, and then, you know, be set in your ways too, and be a little bit of a jaded old man a little bit, and be like, well, I'm not just going to throw any old song out there because it's easy for me to do.
So I have a question before I start wrapping this up. So I was listening to a podcast a while ago, and they talked about you guys were on tour with a band or had a dispute with a band where they like stole a trumpet or a saxophone. Do you know what I'm talking
Yep.
about?
Oh yeah.
So like they stole it and then they were like they would put it on recordings or something, and then I think Frank called them and they put the voice message on something.
Oh yeah, that's the Hickey 7-inch.
That was it. What do you? I don't know if you want. I don't know if that's like it's like a
No,
story you want to tell.
that's so old. That's old news, man. It's
Is
not
that
even
like something you've talked about like a lot?
somewhat. Yeah, it's kind of like one of those. It's one of those things that might have been a sore spot when it happened way back then, and then now we kind of laugh about it. Now it feels like 2 lifetimes ago. So it's like such a long time thing, and I mean a long time ago thing, and it was like we just got caught up in this thing with this band, and it was like I still feel like we're like the innocent bystander in the whole drama all these years later. Basically, what it is, we were on tour right when all that stuff was hot, like 1995, 96. We were on, actually, it was the tour for the Feed Me album. So it was 95, probably late 95 or something. We're on the road. And at that point, we were doing probably the best this band was doing, which is like, at best, selling out clubs, 500 to 1,000 seat places or something. So we weren't giant. We were just doing pretty good. And we were able to afford a tour bus at that time. So it was like the pinnacle of our band for like that the 5 years that we talked about, like being on Epitaph, were basically those 5 years. You know, that was like the height of everything as far as like monetary success or just being looked at as a successful band. Like, you know, the way the stuff that comes with it, like selling out shows and being able to ride in fancy vehicles and shit. Well, that was at this time. We did stuff like in my thought, we did cool stuff like take bands on tour that you probably shouldn't take on tour. Instead of taking out the bands that we probably should have taken out on tour in 1995 to 98 or something, like Real Big Fish or some ska punk band that was up and coming, or Skank and Pickle or somebody. We took out bands like Schlong, who were like 3-piece noise core jazz core that people don't really give a shit about in our scene. But we just did it for the cred because they were like a Gilman band that had the original drummer of Op Ivy. We did more stuff like that. You know, we took Zeke on tour. Instead of taking out a ska band, we took Zeke on the road with us. What are we doing taking out a Motorhead punk band instead of taking out like the third wave ska band? We kind of did stuff that kind of almost bit us on the ass a little bit. Like, I don't regret it, but sort of. We took the band of Schlong out on the road, who were our friends. Like I said, it was like taking like a noise core, avant-garde, like jazz core band out, opening for Voodoo, who was like backyard party ska punk band. You know what I mean? It's two different things. We're out in the middle of this tour, and we meet up with this band called Hickey, who we like literally see at a truck stop. Like we saw them like at a truck stop. Tour bus parked outside, getting gassed up. The Schlong band is in their conversion van, kind of following us along. We get out to do our thing, to go eat or pee or whatever. They come up to us and go, introduce us to a band that happens to be at the same truck stop. Bunch of punk rockers in a filthy van type of thing. We meet them. Didn't think anything of it. Like, I think they smoked a joint on our tour bus or something. Like, they come up with the Schlong guys, walk on this bus, and are like drinking a beer and getting high with somebody or something even at that said truck stop. Okay, you know, nice to meet you guys, blah, blah, blah. We go on with our tour. They go on their own separate ways. We get back to the end of that tour, like the last week of that tour, and we have a show scheduled at the Nile Theater in Phoenix. Now, the Schlong guys who have been on the tour with us the whole time ask us if that band could jump on the show. So they asked us if they could jump on the Phoenix show. You know, it's like, guys, this band is like on tour, real DIY tour. We want to know if they could open the show. And I don't know who the fuck does this, but we get them on the show. Nobody does that at that level. Like an international touring band with tour posters out, being advertised in weeklies and newspapers, and you're just going to add a band that week. Like, nobody does that. You know what I mean? But us being kind of gullible.
See, I don't know. I thought that's kind of cool, actually, that you would do that. I don't know.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. We let their friends band on the show last minute, like the week of the show. We get them on. They're the opening band. And their whole set is talking shit about Epitaph Records and about Voodoo Glow Skulls and about Rancid and about Pennywise. And they just go in. We didn't know that we just got hoodwinked into letting like some like PC San Francisco Bay Area crusty punk band on our show that's all anti Epitaph, anti supposed corporation, and anti major label, right? We walk into the venue like not knowing what's going on, kind of, because they're like the opening band. We just kind of like maybe glanced over and was like seeing what was up or whatever. Walk into like a full on tirade. They're basically not playing music at this point and just going in about, like, it was kind of like this. It was like, oh, that's my fancy tour bus outside. You guys want us to make you a sandwich? You could have food off of my fancy deli tray. That was basically what they were saying to the crowd. And it was our crowd. Like, you know, like pretty much like a sold out show. We walk in on this. So at this point, they're like 10 minutes into their set. And they're kind of like a noise core band. And they're totally sabotaging our show. That was the whole point of them getting on our show. We didn't know this. We got asked by the opening band on our tour to let this band on as the opener. And all they did is try to sabotage the show. Do like some like political spoken word thing about how Epitaph Records is corporate and how Rancid is this. They even went in on Rancid and about Tim Armstrong having like a speech impediment. All this stuff. And we're like in the back of the room, and I take a full can of like Sprite or Mountain Dew and like chuck it at them and hit the drummer in the chest. And like they get kind of booed off stage. Their equipment gets taken off by like the stage handlers. We run backstage and basically have a confrontation with them. Pretty much almost fist fight without a fist fight. Holding up a dude against the wall by his shirt collar, that kind of shit. We were like, well, we're not going to go on stage unless they get kicked out of the building. Like, kick them out of the whole building. They leave, they steal our trumpet on the way out. And that's how that started. We got duped. We got duped by the opening band that was kind of like on our whole tour who we were friends with.
Why did Schlong know that they were going to do that?
I don't think so. But there's that error of like, well, they're them being a Bay Area Gilman band. Maybe they did know. Maybe they didn't tell us. But the whole time, this band's like our bros on tour with us, right? Hanging out in our tour bus. So it was kind of fucked up. It was just fucked up. So we felt like we were innocent in the whole thing, because that's literally how it went down. A band that we would have never had anything to do with got put on our show. They were basically anti us, anti the record label we were on, and anti anything that anyone stood for. They steal our trumpet when they get kicked out. For a couple months, we were basically trying to get the trumpet back because it was like a $4,000 horn that our player had bought at the time. So it was like an expensive instrument. Somehow we ended up getting it back through Skank and Pickle, who knew those guys too. They put out a 7-inch record with the prank calls that were made by people on our behalf. So it was like people from our record label were calling them. My older brother was calling them. Just people were just calling them and berating them on their answer machine. And then, I mean, kind of funny. I'll hand it to them. Kind of a genius move in the punk rock world at the time. They put out a 7-inch record with music from them. And then our supposed side was just all the prank calls. And that's basically what it was. But we got duped into the whole thing basically by a bunch of haters, which we would have just had nothing to do with it. We would have just been like gone on our merry way. But the thing that sucks about that whole thing was like they were basically going after, like, I want to say, like almost like the little guy. We were kind of a known band at the time, yes, but we weren't Offspring. We weren't even Rancid or any. We were like one of the smaller bands on Epitaph, but we got all the shit for it. But they couldn't like dupe their way onto an Offspring show. They could sneak their way onto a Voodoo show.
Did that have like a negative effect on you guys for a while? Or did that kind of work in your favor where people were like, "Oh, you're that band. We're going to go see you now."
Well, I mean, to this day, we'll get shit still to this day. But it's like one person. It's like what you'd expect. One lowly dude on the internet will comment somewhere randomly, and you could still see it. It's still there. Let me see where I saw it. I saw it not that long ago. Somebody will do a post somewhere and somebody will comment something, like one little remark out of all the remarks. And there'll be like that one dude still championing, that's still going, but that thing, but came out in fucking 1999 or whatever. You know what I mean? It's still that thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's a pretty infamous story. Like, it's from a prank perspective, if you don't know either side, you look at it and you could just be like, "Damn, that's fucked up."
Yeah. I mean, we got duped into the whole thing, like I said. And like, to me, it's like, why are you going after these guys? Like, that's how my whole perspective was. It's like, you're going after the dudes that could barely afford the tour bus. If you're going to go after some corporate shit, go after go after the Offspring who signed to the major. Go after those guys. Go after the dudes that left the indie to sign to a major to become rock stars. Not the dudes that are like paying for a tour bus out of their own pocket because they have 8 motherfuckers traveling with them. You know what I mean? So it was like, they kind of went after like the wrong band, in my opinion, still. And then some of that stuff, to me, if you really dig deep, was like sort of pseudo, like anti-Latino, kind of racist, kind of hierarchy thing going on. There was a little tinge of like them fucking with us because we were Latin dudes from the West Coast or from Southern California. I don't know. It was like one more word, and it would have been like basically blatant like racism towards like
Really?
a lot. Yeah, that was the era. There was an era about like, yeah, they're San Francisco crusty punks, but like well educated. Like, where'd your parents go to school, bro? There was a little bit of that going on. I don't know. They were San Francisco State kind of student type shit. To me, there was a little air of like almost racism, like pseudo. Let's go after the West Coast, the LA, like dumb fuck, like like the Latino hardcore band kind of thing. It's like, why fuck with us? Like, we were the ones that kind of come from the gutter too, bro. Like, we're not. I'm from East LA. Yeah, it might ring true in some in some of their circles or some of that PC punk stuff that doesn't matter anymore. But like I said, how come they didn't go after the rich white boys from Redondo Beach?
Well, it's probably easier access to get on your bus because they're friends with this one band. The bridge of getting on there is so simple to get on with you guys.
They basically got their in, but they got their in through like kind of like they should have went after. Like I said, they should have went after Rancid.
Well, if you think about it too, and I'm just spitballing here, but you think if they had the opportunity to get on the stage when Rancid was playing, you think they would have had the balls to do the same thing?
I don't think so. I think they
Yeah.
would have got some kind of crazy beatdown, which in hindsight, when I think about it now, that's still that the man part of me comes out and goes, yeah, we should have beat him up. We should have mopped the floor with him. Like, just beat him up. It would have been over. But we're so nice that we didn't even do that. That's the thing, is that we're not even those dudes. Like, we were just like a big nerdy ska punk band. We weren't even like trying to fight anybody. Sure, half our band is over 6 foot tall, and we could have kicked their ass for sure, and could probably do it now. It wasn't even like our MO, bro. It wasn't even our style. We were too fun loving of a band and having too much of a good time to where we're like, what? This is happening now at our show? It was just came out of left field.
Maybe it was like kind of too because we said in the beginning that the style that you guys have is like aggressive, or not, how did I say it in the beginning?
Yeah, no, yeah, but yeah, I mean that's right, and it could have been that. It could have been a tinge of that, but it was like there was a sense that they were going after like the corporate dudes in this corporate band. That's basically what the tirade was about. It couldn't have been further from the truth in a lot of ways. I mean, we were on that Epitaph ride that a lot of people would have loved to have been on, like in '95. I'll be the first to admit it, but we weren't. We were still the band that was under about 6 bands. You know what I mean? There was like, if you do the math, it was like Offspring, Bad Religion, Pennywise, No Effects. And there's probably a few that I'm forgetting about, but we were like 5 bands under the main band, 5 or 6 bands under as far as record sales go too. So we were like, it's kind of like, why are you messing with the middle for, bro? Like, it's so stupid. It's like, you're not going to go after the big corporate band that signed to the major and like left Epitaph or something. That's like, so to me, it was just kind of weird. And like, it just felt like the underdog fucking with the underdog to me.
Did you ever get a chance through the years to like, did ever talk to those guys at all, or like someone who talked to them where you guys got to say like, what the fuck, or has it just always been just left as it was?
Well, the main guy, the singer guy, got found with like a needle in his arm from a heroin. Like, so that shows you where they're coming from.
Oh, Jesus.
Like they found him with like a needle in his arm from a heroin overdose, like in 2002 or something.
Oh my God.
So that's that guy. And then like the one guy, the drummer guy who was the other main guy, I think they were like a 3-piece. The other dude piped in on something on Instagram. I want to say like 3-4 years ago. I noticed a comment and looked down, and it was the dude from the band. And it was like, there was no fighting them anymore. One of their cronies piped in like, look who it is. Like one of the Voodoo Glow Skulls guys. And he was like, kind of like, oh, it was like, been there, done that. Like, I don't got time for this anymore kind of comment. So it was like, I don't even have the strength, or I'm not. It was kind of like, oh, you're still about this? It was like 25 years ago. No, we never had any like, there was never like any closure from that, or I wouldn't really even know what to say or do. I would just be like, ah.
You're like, thanks for this story that I have to keep fucking repeating like through the years.
Yeah, I actually repeated this story on a podcast recently.
Was that the Event in Defense of Ska one?
Yeah, the Indefensa Ska one, they asked me about it. I'm pretty good friends with those guys, and they know the story. They asked me if we could do the story for their bonus stuff for their podcast that people pay for or their
Oh, the
Patreon.
Patreon.
Yeah, like sure. Like well, I don't have any problems talking about it. But yeah, it's such a like thing. Hey, it's a thing, man. It's like anything else in life. It's controversies. We've had bigger controversies like my older brother not being in the band anymore. That's way bigger to me than like something that happened so long ago that was like, well, those guys were kind of messing with the people that were in a lot of ways kind of like them in a way. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, we're not the same, but we're the underdog. We weren't really like the big corporate band that they set it out to be, and we were probably struggling ourselves and probably could barely afford the tour bus we were in or something. You know what I mean? It wasn't like their finger wasn't on the pulse the way they thought. We have some regrets, but not so much. I guess if my regret was not beating them up, then I don't really think about that so much anymore. And that's just a thought. It's not like I wish we would have kicked their ass, but the thought does cross my mind still once in a while. I'm like, oh, we should have beat them up, but why? I probably would have felt worse now. But hey, it happened. It's one of those things that we can't deny, and it's out there somewhere, and it's probably worth some money to somebody. I'm sure the record's worth something to somebody somewhere. It resurfaced on YouTube, and then it got taken down from what I hear, and then that was it. Yeah, once in a while we get stuff for it, but it's so rare. Like a little bit closer to that time though, to end this, but a little bit closer to that era, like maybe when we were on Victory, like 2002, 4, there was some incidents. Like there was an incident in England where a dude did something at a show, and like our merch guy and somebody else from our crew chased the dude down the street into like a pizza parlor or something. Like that happened. And then once in a while we would get like our van would get tagged with a note or like, little things, but never anything that was a big threat or never anything to really write home about so much. Just a couple of incidents, like few and far between, like, oh, one of those is here. It would be like that. It would be like, what? Like really? Like 10 years later? It was kind of like that. I'm not surprised that we get asked about it once in a while. It really doesn't come up all that much anymore, and it's less and less now, of course. My older brother called them like wasted on a press trip. He was in Europe doing like that's how crazy it was back in 1996 that you would get flown to Amsterdam to stay at Epitaph headquarters and do press. Just press. No tour. That's how crazy it was for us back then, is that my brother was in Amsterdam calling that phone number drunk from a hotel room. It's like, well, if you're going to do that, they have the right to do what they want with a recording. It's just kind of like opening yourself up. Yeah, I mean, I don't regret any of that stuff. It's all part of the thing.
Well, I'm gonna wrap this up. I usually would ask, is there a story you've never told that in an interview they'd like to tell now? But I feel like that suffice.
That might be it.
That works for that one.
And that's pretty far in detail. That's about as in detail as I've gone with it. Like I went actually pretty further, saying that you're going to open yourself up to that stuff when you call people drunk and talk shit. But it is what it is, man. That happened a long time ago, and that guy's dead, and we're alive. I'm playing Punk in the Park, for Christ's sake, with Offspring.
Yeah, I see this.
So who's come full circle, bro? Like, it's kind of funny. We're playing with Offspring in those bands, and those guys don't exist anymore.
All right, so I'm gonna wrap this up with 2 questions before I ask the last one. What would you like to plug? It could be about you. It could be about a friend or a cause. It could be about all of them.
Oh, my plug, man. I don't know. I mean, it'd be kind of redundant to say, listen to Voodoo Glow Skulls and blah blah blah.
How about your studio or the Punk in the Park?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're glad to be in the mix still. Like we've been talking, and we get to do cool stuff. Thankfully, we have some great shows coming up. We're going to Australia in November. We're doing Punk in the Park in San Diego with all these great legendary bands that have become something. That's pretty much it. We're going on tour in January with Mustard Plug, the Pacific Northwest, sort of West Coast kind of tour. Going to Europe next year. We're going twice to Europe next year, actually, to play some festivals. and we're working on new music right now as we speak. I'm actually going through demos right now. We're going through songs and seeing what's worthy and what's not worthy, and kind of rewriting stuff and recording new ideas. So we're very much actively trying to do new music, and eventually put something out in some form or another. So that's really the stuff I have to plug.
All right, to close it out, what scene ethics do you hold on to this day?
Well, I mean, I'm still, I'd still like to think that some of those basic punk rock, those ethics are still there. We're not trying to make a bunch of money off merchandise or ask for crazy money for shows or anything like that. And we're still trying to keep it real and have some sense of responsibility when we like write lyrics. You know what I mean? We're still trying to, feel like we have something to say. You know what I mean? And aren't really trying to be like that band on a corporate label that maybe we got made out to be by that one incident that we just mentioned. It's like the opposite of that. As a matter of fact, we're still doing it with, where once in a while we'll eat shit. We play little bars and little clubs, and we just played a bar and like we just did a Mexican tour and played in Juarez. I mean, nobody plays there. We played like a 300-person bar in Juarez, Mexico, where it's dangerous to go there and they kill hookers and stuff like that. You know what I mean? It's like, we still do the work, man. We're still very much into the scene, so to speak, just to thrive in somewhat of a DIY scene, whether it be a ska scene or a punk rock scene or whatnot. We're still playing these little places and having fun and trying to keep it real, for whatever that means.